Ding, ding.
Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone, to the House Committee on General and Housing. It is Friday still, and it is still February 21st. We are taking testimony this afternoon, or this morning before lunch, from Alex Farrell and Chris Cochran, both from Housing and Community Development and Department of Housing and Community. I think you guys know the committee. So you want to state your name for the record and take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Mahali. For the record, Alex Farrell, Commissioner at the Department of Housing and Community Development. For the moment, you can ignore Chris's slides up here, pretend they're not there. I'm going to be somewhat brief because there's a couple topics I just want to cover at a high level. And then I'm going to refer you to a couple folks who can dive in more detail with you when you desire. So I've given you some handouts, one on the $9.1 million Vermont Infrastructure Sustainability Fund proposal, and another on VHIP. I'm going to start with the ISF, the Infrastructure Sustainability Fund. So that's the more boring looking handout that I gave you. You can blame me, I don't have much design talent. So this is just a little bit more depth. A lot of this will mimic what you already see in statute, but it gives a little bit more detail as to how we're thinking about these funds, how we're trying to prioritize smaller communities, and what eligible activities are. And so the way we're thinking about this is trying to prioritize housing, of course, but we're also trying to be broad in terms of what can be funded. So this could be transportation, such as sidewalks and roads. It could also be water and wastewater into the site. Again, as we've talked about before, the municipality is the eligible entity on this. These are revolving loans, so they would be at a low interest rate. We, as you can see in here, are contemplating either delayed repayment, potential forgiveness, leaving some of that up to the discretion of the bond bank, who has a relationship with these municipalities and works with them frequently. But I'm not going to dive into all of this because you now have this at your disposal. But I do want to give you a little space to ask any questions about the ISF and how we're intending to implement it.
We did just hear from the League of Cities and Towns. And they, of course, like this, but they suggested that we expand the eligible uses to include project management and financial grants management.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think that's great.
Okay, I know from my own experience in a project that project management and grants management can be in some ways almost as important as development. I don't mean vertical development, I mean money development. So yeah.
That unlocks other sources.
That might work. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah. Does the committee have any questions about? And of course, they urged that there be more money.
Funny.
Yeah.
This was the program that gave the bond bank the authority to kind of work with towns as to sometimes buying down rates farther or sometimes more subsidy. But yeah, okay.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think if there's a. The testimony that we received from Michael John indicated that he would leverage that money to the maximum extent he could by using it to pair with the other funds in the bond bank and buy down interest rates, or otherwise use credit enhancements.
Mhm.
And I do know that some green banks, like the Connecticut Green Bank, they have leveraging rates of like 10 to 1. And in fact, the average rate, I think even more, the average of all green banks in the United States, their average leveraging rate is, many multiples. And that in some ways, the last thing you want to do is actually use the 9.1 million
Right.
to actually lend it,
Right.
rather than to leverage it with credit enhancements or other devices.
I think that's exactly right, Mr. Chair. And that, to some extent, that's why the 9.1 is in a sense misleading, because we're really intending to stretch it much further. All right, thank you. So given there's VHIP language in your bill, I did want to give A high level overview of VHIP, where it's at, how it's being implemented. I'll also say that, more in-depth, testimony on VHIP, if you'd like, could be, given by Sean Gilpin from my team, the director of the housing division, as well as Jamie Bauer from his team, who, runs that from our department. So I'm turning now to this handout that I passed around, the more colorful handout, developed by my talented staff. So you're all very familiar with VHIP, so I won't go into a great deal of detail, but where I always like to start with VHIP is the map, because this tells the story of how VHIP has been so successful. And if you just drive around, say, Rutland, where we're seeing the greatest impact, not just per capita, but in terms of actual units, you're not surprised, because you see a lot of vacant structures, underutilized neighborhoods, where you drive through and you say, boy, people ought to be living in these buildings. VHIP has had a tremendous impact there, and I want to give the homeownership centers a lot of credit for what they've done. NeighborWorks has done a tremendous job implementing VHIP down there. We did recently clear the 1,000 unit threshold, with over 1,000 units funded. So by my last count, I'd say at least 500 of those were in VHIP 1.0, which means all of those were serving the 5-year of the homelessness
5 year.
component.
Okay, well, again, how many?
Over
Out of that, you said at least.
at least 500.
500, okay.
Let me, you know what, I have the actual number right here, so before I state. 525 is the exact number from VHIP 1.0.
And that was the 5-year loans.
All of those were 5-year, because in VHIP 1.0, there was not the 2-year option because we didn't have state dollars yet. Looking at VHIP 2.0, so far, 235 units have been funded, and 1/3 of those units are the 5-year option, 2/3 are the 10-year option, so the longer compliance period. One of the items that we've been discussing a lot in here at other committees is the timeline on when some of these units are going to end their compliance period, when the covenant expires and they can rent these to whomever they'd like. So on the back of the handout, it just shows a quick timeline. I want to point something out about this timeline that's really important. So
Can you explain this? I'm not sure I understand it.
I certainly can. So what you're seeing in the top chart is when units were completed. And so you can see in 2020, 66 units were completed.
Got it. Okay.
So let's start there. All 66 of those units were using coronavirus relief funds. So this was actually before VHIP was called VHIP. This was RHRP. At that time, because it was not VHIP yet, there was no homelessness requirement. So these were just serving folks that had fair market rents. So now if you go down to the bottom, this is where these two interact. So the 66 that completed in 2020, their compliance period is going to end in 2025 this year. I just want to
see.
flag,
Yeah,
none of those are units that rehouse folks exiting homelessness. Well, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say necessarily, just none of them had that requirement.
right, yeah.
And so when folks,
66.
that's right, those first 66. So when folks have are trying to zero in on when are these first units coming offline that rehouse folks out of homelessness, we're really looking at the end of next year, end of 2026, and we're starting in 2027. So you can see in this bottom chart, there's sort of a ramp up in 27, 28, and 29. That's the bulk of VHIP 1 units. So those are the units that we're really looking at when we're thinking about those 5-year units that rehouse folks exiting homelessness. Those are the ones where we're trying to, one of the objectives of the program of that 5-year component was to give a runway so that our CDBG funding, VHCB, VHFA, their portfolio could catch up as they're trying to expand their stock. VHIP units were intended to be that immediate, help them catch up on and expand their portfolio and house those folks in the meantime.
Alex, a couple of questions about this.
Yes.
Gus was here and testified that one of the statutory requirements that is applicable to VHCB is that they step in and try to prevent units from exiting one or another subsidized or, limited period. Would that apply to these VHIP units? Like VHCB has kind of an obligation to come in and try to in some way do anything about this? Or is it, as I also understand, that there's really nothing they can do because these units are small, disparate, and not easily managed by nonprofit agencies which like to have bigger projects.
Yeah, well,
Want to
so
comment on that?
the comment I can make is on the first side of it, I'm not that conversant with VHCC, that portion of VHCC statute. I'll say you're exactly right, Mr. Chair, that these are private landlords, these are disparate units. These are not easily managed because they're scattered all over the state. And so for VHCB to approach these, they could theoretically work with the homeownership centers. I'll also say that you've got a lot of folks in here who never would have taken on affordable housing had they not had these. And so VHCB's mechanism for ensuring affordability is through perpetual affordability. That's a requirement that comes with their investment or the perpetual loan. So you have a lot of people that have received these grants that would never ever do it if perpetual affordability were required.
Also, one other thing, if you could inform us on, which I don't really know much about. I know HUD, fair market rent, is a statutory term of art, and that it is generally, despite its name, less than actual fair market.
That's right.
Is it a lot less or a little less?
I'd need to defer to the experts. I bet Leslie Black-Fumo could give you a good sense of that.
About this a bit in our committee, right? And then
Yeah, I couldn't pull
we
those
can't
numbers
pull
out.
it either, but we did have information on that.
Is it, but what happens, just to clarify, on expiration, it means that the landlord is free to go from HUD fair market rent to whatever they can get, which would mean, actual fair market rent, right?
Right. Market rate.
Market rate.
So HUD fair market rents, my recollection is the objective of those is to meet what would be 30% of the income for folks, I think at 80% of area median income, not the median income. I believe it is intended to aim for the 80% AMI, 30% of their income. Does that sound right?
Joe, do you remember?
I can't pull it out of thin air.
Well, we went over the other thing.
My team could confirm.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a timeline that we're keeping a close eye on. Operationally, here's how we're managing this, trying to get more data. We're working on, and this will be our first summer where our recertification process will be up and running, where these landlords will be sent essentially a survey, but a requirement of the program. They have to send us certain information back, things like how much turnover they've had, how are these folks staying in the units. We are also intending to find out what they plan to do when the covenant expires. We would be interested to find out if these relationships, because anecdotally we're hearing that private landlords who, like I said, never would have considered doing affordable housing, let alone rehousing somebody who had experienced homelessness. We're hearing that it's actually building some really good connections with some of these landlords and the coordinated entry agencies. And so we want to try to ground truth that in some data. Is this actually developing new bridges where we now have a new path for folks from the coordinated entry list? So hopefully this data will give us more insight into that and will help us give you all answers when you start to think about 2027, 2028, and some of these 5-year covenants are coming to an end.
Alex, there is in the draft legislation, which is still a draft, produced by the administration, a strikeout of all the language, as you know, for the 10-year program requiring the homelessness
Right.
language. And there's a concern that means that everybody will just go with the 10-year program. And I'm wondering if you folks have had any brilliant illuminations as to how to deal with that concern other than simply taking it out.
So I'd say there are two ways that we're thinking of this. The first is the language that was inserted. We were never asked to testify on. None of our partners were asked to testify on. We weren't even aware of it to the extent we were actually under the impression it was a drafting error. And when we saw it, the logic was so flawed that we thought this couldn't have possibly been intended. Why would somebody say, okay, I can take a 5-year covenant with this requirement or a requirement to do the same thing over twice the amount of time? Why would somebody possibly take the 10-year option if the requirement's exactly the same? They would always just choose the 5-year. And so in order for there to still be an incentive to take a longer covenant, you need to do one of two things. Either relax the requirement, like how the program's was originally designed and how it's been implemented. Or if you want to make the requirements the same for both time periods, then you need to increase the incentive for the 10-year. So that is another way. That is not how it's been operated on the ground. But if folks wanted to say, if you take a VHIP grant or forgivable loan, you're rehousing somebody out of homelessness, I don't care. Then I would say the only way to make that work is to introduce a much higher incentive for the 10-year.
The incentive, you mean, when you say incentive, like what, like the amount of money that they have to contribute versus what we have contributed?
I would say the cap of the grant. So in this case, it's a 30,000 grant, $30,000 cap, or 50, depending on if you're doing a conversion or if your unit is going to have more than 3 bedrooms, as well as certain accessibility components that also gives you the ability to hit the increased cap. So yeah, that's what I would say is if folks wanted to operate it that
Make
way,
it an option.
make it you could make it an option with a cap. And then you could toy with lowering the match. I'll say the match has not been a hurdle for most folks, so I don't think that would be much of an incentive. In fact, we're seeing about 100% match and often more than that in most cases.
Yeah, I have a question on the just kind of the visitability units. This was reworked. Would that require somebody to take the 50, or could I do 10,000 for rehab and the full 20, make it now visibly?
Oh, I see.
I don't have to hit the full threshold,
Right.
to unlock that 20.
Yes, no, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
But yes, go
Any other
ahead.
question?
It's very closely related. My question is, if I had, anecdotally, if I had a cousin who is disabled and I want to, I have an attached apartment that I want my cousin to be able to rent from me. Can I use the ADA upgrade money without having to unlock the rehabilitation money first?
Right.
In your own opinion? Or in,
I'd better defer to my team as to how it's been implemented. The only reason I'm hesitating is not that you need to access the rehabilitation in order to use the accessibility. What I'm hesitating on is the family, because we have had questions come about how to rehouse family using these grants. And I don't remember how that was resolved. And so I don't want to misspeak.
okay, let's say it wasn't a family member. Let's just say it was somebody who is disabled for whom you want to, or whom you want to house. Do you have to access the rehabilitation part before the ADA part?
No.
And would it have the same payback rate?
Yeah, no, so my understanding is they're just two different paths to go down.
Okay.
It's just an eligibility.
I want to ask the question again. The same question,
Okay,
just to make sure that there's a meeting of the minds. Say what I'm coming in with. I don't want to rehab my unit. All I want to do is make it accessible.
Accessibility upgrades.
And
Yeah.
I want to upgrade the accessibility, and let's say I want $11,000.
There's nothing wrong with your unit.
There's nothing wrong with my unit. Is this eligible, or is the argument no, it's not interested in that. We're interested in creating new units.
Yeah, no, absolutely it is. The statute, as I understand it, is that created another path to access the unit. Not that you also have to do one of these other things. If my staff has a different understanding, then
Will you let us know right away?
I will let you know right away. I am not under the impression that you need to also rehabilitate.
Okay.
is that in writing somewhere?
I believe in statute.
Okay,
Sorry, I
ahead.
might be misunderstanding your question, but I think it's in the new language in the governor's proposal with it's that additional 20,000. How to get to 20,000.
yeah. That's the question.
Yeah,
It's worded as up to an additional,
Yeah,
which
Yes.
means there
That's
must
the
be
problem.
something before the 20.
That's what we,
Oh,
we,
My understanding is you can access up to 50, but to
For
access
rehabilitation.
for anything. For anything,
Right.
including,
including accessibility.
that's,
But it's saving and it's reducing the 70 to 50 so that we know that there's always gonna be 20,000 that is only if you have reached the 50 and the extra 20 is required for
that is the question.
accessibility.
Yeah.
That is the
I
actual
think you
question.
might be right, but Alex, do you
I
understand
mean, the
where,
way
what
I'm
we're
reading it
Now
now.
I
is what it
done,
says.
and what we want to do is,
Because it says
We-
additional.
we want to clarify.
We did this in
We
transportation all
wanna-
the
I
time,
guess,
like,
let me, am I
Yeah.
speaking
So sorry,
correctly for the committee
Yeah.
in that we would like to make sure, clarify the language
Yeah.
to mean what you just said it means, which is someone, whether they're using the part of the 50,000 or part of the 20, whatever it is, they can just address accessibility in a unit. Is that right?
Yes, but also there is, I just wanted the sticking point of family thing where it's like, are you just putting really a rental unit that existed and all you're doing is, or is this bringing somebody into your home,
Just family member.
family member into your home?
And do they have to be disabled?
Well,
I think we have safely entered into the territory where
Yeah.
my staff ought to be.
Okay.
sounds,
But I guess that the question is, what difference does it make if it's a family member or not, if you're renting to them?
So, and the short answer is just, accepting public dollars does come with, just certain fair housing law requirements. And so I'm not gonna answer your question directly because I think there may be some ways to avoid fair housing concerns if it is free housing a family member with certain disability. But I'll say there is a concern that someone could just take VHIP grants, VHCB grants, whatever, and then just, my son moves in. And maybe that's okay. It just, unit needs to be available to rent for anybody who meets the requirements.
Well, the question ultimately being, you could clarify it in language, because we
Well-
felt that the language could be interpreted any number of ways.
Separately, that question, yes, I understand
Yeah.
now. I can tell you my impression had been, because I believe we're actually returning back to, in the governor's proposed language, I believe was actually returned back to language originally proposed in this committee a year or two ago. And I thought I recalled the objective was to just get it up to 70,000 if you're making the unit accessible, just to raise the cap for those. Why don't we have Sean Gilpin in here to,
Clarify that.
yeah, absolutely.
There's one other question, having to do with nebulous language. All right, help me out here, Mike. The question was, what is the question was,
Prior draft.
it said something about,
Let's see.
it said something about, there being a reduction in the annual payment. How did we go? It was a reduction in the annual payment based on how much of the payment had been made. So that by year, oh, here it is,
Where are you?
page 3.
Yeah, where? Close to it.
No, that's not it.
Oh, was the
Prorated
department the
credit?
10% of the amount of the.
The 10%, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Whether that is on the initial amount or whether that is on the amount as it, what do you call it? Amortization.
In other words, we just wanted to clarify that it says now the department shall forgive 10% of the amount of forgivable loan each year the land participates in the loan program. It's the idea after 10 years it's gone.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's not 10% of the remaining balance.
It's a
10% of the original loan balance.
10-year
Okay.
straight line, yeah.
All right, and there were other questions. One of them is, why did you remove the loan requirement, the ability to loan money in the 5-year program?
I need to double check on this. We don't actually have an objection to operating both as forgivable loans. They just hadn't been, the 5-year hadn't been operated as a forgivable loan.
Okay, just practice.
It
wasn't happening.
was to match what's happening in practice. Now, that said, There is no objection to operating those. for
Okay.
different
No objection. The second is, that someone raised. There's a section in terms of eligibility. Landlord shall lease, this is the 5-year program, shall lease. Well. It says composed of at least one individual with a disability. It used to say who is eligible to receive Medicaid funded. Now it says who received or is approved to receive. Seems to narrow it. Is there any intention?
The goal here, and again, I'm gonna defer to my team. I can tell you what the goal was. The language is drafted, they felt didn't quite capture the population that we think this committee intended to capture. And so we consulted with AHS to grab a term that already has a definition in statute that we could use in operation. So in essence, this was an effort to make operation easier, so we can
Okay.
point back to something and define a clear population.
So there are two ways to resolve open questions. One is actually have Sean come in here, and we have limited time for testimony, but that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is for you guys to send us an email what your intentions are.
I think that's gonna be easiest so that our general counsel can just email. This is, we can go back and make sure all these questions are answered.
Okay.
Just ask a
Go ahead,
quick
please.
question on that. So just, I mean, to me, the fear is that a state agency that has to, like, if we're saying that somebody has to be approved by somebody
Mhm.
to qualify, and there's just a lot of weight or backlog, and this person would be eligible, they just haven't received the official stamp of approval, then we're not helping somebody that needs help, but that we would otherwise want to help. So that's, I guess the question is, are there backlogs? Like, I would want to know how easy is it to be approved?
Yeah, is there anyone who's gonna fall through the cracks because of this change? That's the question, I think the concern.
I see, to meet the definition. of
Right, and
disability.
I mean, if it's purely operational, it's one thing, but if there's literally, we're shrinking we're shrinking it, then that's another.
I don't believe the objective was to shrink it, so I'll make sure that general counsel and the policy team weighs in.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
And when they're doing the family aspect, just if they can clarify if they are a renter, like if the renter happens to be a family member who's paying rent,
Yes.
does that disqualify? I think that was that, maybe I misunderstood people's question earlier, but
I think you're right. I think that is also an open question.
Okay.
I heard over here, so we can certainly weigh in on that. Thank you very much.
Alex, a few other stray questions, if I might.
Please.
We haven't had much testimony on the CAMA appraisal database.
Sure.
If you want to give us just a 2 minutes on this, it's not very controversial, but
I
what's
can.
going on?
I can. So folks are familiar with the dashboard that we recently published. The objective is to give a real-time picture of units coming online. In order to do that, we're accessing several different state data sources. This is satellite imagery. This includes E911 data, and we're trying to bring in as many data sources as possible to make sure that we're confirming that these units truly are coming online. One of those sources that actually would be really reliable and granular would be grand list data. CAMA is the platform that holds this grand list data. There has been for years, this has been an issue where we haven't been able to access that data for other purposes aside from just the tax department accessing it. And so this would put in statute essentially forcing the software company to let us use that grand list data for this purpose.
And you, just so you're aware, I'm sorry, you wanted to say something? Yeah.
I was going to ask, but it's slightly unrelated, so if yours is related, I will wait.
I was going to say, just maybe for comment, we are looking hard at the question of whether the data that landlords file with the tax department how close that is to the the data considered to be important in a rental registry, and whether it can be made available in a way that is appropriate to you and others who are interested in data collection. We are having someone from the tax department testify, but Magali, do we also have someone from DHCD testifying on that?
I had been working with the commissioner and with Netta to
Okay.
schedule someone for that, but the general conclusion is that the folks from tax or Leslie Black, from DHFA would be the best witnesses.
From VHFA, okay. The concern, the reason that we thought we wanted to talk to you guys is because we heard that, yes, in fact, you did have available to you some of the information, in which case we need to know what's missing and why, yeah, what's missing. And- Okay, you don't have it.
No, so, and I should, thank you, Mr. Chair, because this is important. I should draw a clear delineation between the CAMA data
Yeah, and I know, we're not talking camera, right?
and you're talking about the landlord certificate, which came out of Senate Economic Development and that language last year. So the goal was to enable whoever is performing the housing needs assessment, which the last 2 times has been
VHFA, okay.
to access that data from tax.
So VHFA is we have to hear from VHFA.
Yes, I think it's useful to hear from VHFA as to what would be useful data. Chad, feel free to correct as what would be useful data and maybe what hurdles they experienced in getting it from tax. And I think you need to hear from tax as to their concerns regarding using the landlord certificate as the vehicle for this data. So.
Can I just get a clarification? I was under the that you were the pass-through for VHFA to get it.
In practical terms in statute, that may be how it's written. We've effectively just paired up the 2 parties to say.
So you basically just stepped back and went like this? You guys share information? Oh,
Go ahead.
okay.
Chad Smith from Mount Housing Finance Agency. As the commissioner mentioned, that's how it practically works, is essentially we have an agreement that when we are hired to do the housing needs assessment, we have an agreement with DHCD and the tax department that we can access the data, the existing data for the housing needs assessment from the landlord certificate or other places. That is currently how it exists now. The law that you all passed last year, which is essentially in law now, but the effective date is for July 1st of this year, adds new sections to the landlord certificate that could be included in data that we gather from the tax department. So just to clarify, I want to make a delineation between the landlord certificate and what we're trying to accomplish there and any conversations around the rental registry, which is in our view separate. Those are separate policy goals. The policy goals for the landlord certificate is to gather data to help us with both the housing needs assessment and updating the housingdata.org website on a regular basis. So again, to clarify, we currently have access to and get information from the tax department for those 2 purposes.
I think we'll further clarify this when we have that testimony. In the administration proposal, there is a housing development tech assistant position. What is that?
So this would, this is one of our intended extensions of one of our existing limited service positions. So there are a few efforts that we want to undertake, and we're seeking an extension so that we can move these efforts forward. So 2 that are directly related to technical assistance. So related to Homes for All and VHIP, we're seeking solutions around folks who still aren't necessarily comfortable or knowledgeable in small scale development, but would be interested. So perhaps someone who, owns a property would love to add an ADU or has enough on their parcel for adding a couple units, but they don't know how to go about any of this. They don't know how to access an attorney, someone who can do design work, et cetera. Our objective is to develop a technical assistance program where we, for shorthand, have some of those folks on retainer, say. And this would be a list of folks that someone who needs this assistance could come in and access. And so we want to stand that up so that folks can come and access that technical assistance. The idea being it expands the universe of
It's an
people.
FTE.
It is an existing
Okay.
entity, that's right. The other piece of this is we had implemented a couple of years ago, and we had funding attached, what we called the funders and regulators roundtable. And the goal was a project could come to us, and it would be several folks from state agencies that either fund or regulate through Act 250 or A&R permitting, as well as VHFA participated, VHCB and others, so that early on in the project, they could come to us, present where they're at, present their plans, and then we could all in one document give them feedback so that we could give them direction, tell them how we are going to view their project.
Comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's important because, in our conversations and other with stage that we, need to give people the tools that they need to be able to do the things that we ask. And as we continue to make asks of agencies, that they have the resources and people that they need. So I do think that it's important.
Thank you.
We, just a couple other quick things where we just want to get some stuff on the record here. We've been addressing the vacant housing and issue, and there's the report that recommends a statewide land bank, which came out of your shop. And we are taking some testimony on that. But if we were to act, it wouldn't be to try to stand up a program at this point. It would be tried to have a study which would produce proposed legislation, and it would be managed. I don't know in whose shop, whether it's in Chris Cochran's shop or whose, but it's ultimate. Do you have any comment on that?
And so the study was managed in the housing division, so Sean Gilpin's division.
Yeah, okay.
I think any further study would probably include cooperation with Chris's division. We plan to continue to advance that discussion no matter what. So a study in statute is always welcome, but we plan to move that forward in any event.
We are also, one of the suggestions that implicates you guys came from one RPC, which is the idea of some sort of pre-approved code compliant, quote, vernacular house. Is this something I should leave to Chris's?
I think Chris.
Fine job.
Chris will speak to that. If there are other items that you'd like me to stay in the chair for, I'm happy to.
Okay, I think is there any other thing that anyone would like to ask Alex while we've got him? Because we've got him. He's here.
Yeah.
Okay, for now.
Okay, thank you, Chair Mahal.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
recap, we'll make sure we go through this, answer all the questions in writing.
And in an email to Magali, who she can distribute it, PC me, but I mean, I think it's gonna go to the committee. And that will inform our drafting. Joe, did you have something?
Yeah, one last thing. Just want to make sure I heard correctly. In the camera system section there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounded like you were asking to work directly with that software.
This is just enabling us to access data from software.
Okay, but it's still municipality's job to send you that information.
And they already do. Yeah, they already send it to tax. It's in a database and we just want to access it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
It's accessing a database.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. So it is a quirky thing to
Not
have
running
running,
the-
but
Yeah, you're not running the software, tax is running the software.
that's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Gotcha.
Any other questions? Members of the committee for this moment in time?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, member of the committee.
Okay. Chris, you're up.
I've got you at the best time of the week, Friday, right before lunch, so I know I've got all.
Better than Friday at 3.
Yeah.
I must have did it.
For the record, my name is Chris Cochran. I'm the Director of Community Planning and Revitalization, and I have the pleasure of working with Alex, who is my boss. Last time I was here, I was kind of cut short, so I just wanted to give a little table setting on kind of my division, if that's all right, and I'll kind of get to the point, to the question you're trying to get answered about what is this project, pre-permitting, vernacular house design. So I've got some good
Yeah, we have
slides.
other questions too.
Okay, all right, but I'll be quick. This, the picture above me on the top is a picture of our small but mighty team. We are incredibly mission focused and hardworking and great system changers. And I think because of this team, I have one of the best jobs in state government. Despite our small size, we hit way above our weight because we have a huge network of local partners, regional partners, state partners to kind of help us achieve our goals, shared goals. We've built this network because people know we bring innovative ideas to the table and we deliver on the results. And I submit to you that, you know, while system change is hard, you need coalitions of people together to kind of make these things happen. Without the efforts of this team photographed here, I don't think we would have had the Home Act, which preempted local zoning regulations. We would not have had Act 181 that did major changes to Act 250 and modernized the state designation program. And we would not have this proposal that I'm talking about now with this Homes for All initiative to kind of create new infill housing opportunities in our small towns. Just a little short commercial on kind of what we're working on next. We tackle, I joke that we swim to the shark. You know, we should know better not to swim to the really tricky, complicated problem, but we tend to take on the things that nobody else wants to touch. One thing that we're working on now in a partnership with UVM funded by the Leahy Institute is how do we really tackle the rural capacity issues? How do we get people in communities to support the projects and the development needed to make these projects happen? That project kicks off actually Monday with a huge steering committee of everybody from the Vermont Community Foundation to VHA and a lot of other groups in between. So we presented this to the Rural Caucus. There's a lot of excitement and interest and enthusiasm. We plan to end with kind of a summit, much like what we did for designation programs, with a bunch of recommendations that we want everybody to buy into and hopefully implement in the next session. We are required to issue a report with recommendations. How do we make our rural service delivery system work better? The other thing we're working on now is our department got a pretty big chunk of money, we hope, from HUD to do disaster recovery for all of our flood affected communities in 2023. We've been working in this space for a long, long time. We've done some successful projects post Irene, but I think one of the gaps in the lessons learned from those prior projects was that we tend to look at specific municipalities and projects that we need to improve them and their problems. And we fix a problem there and we send more water down to the next community. So what we're trying to do is take a broader look and look larger scale at the whole watershed and create opportunities and governance structures where, for instance, you know, Montpelier will see a benefit in investing in a town project in Plainfield because it helps them lower their flood risks in the downtown area. So that's enough from the commercials, but I'm here a little bit mostly to just talk about the position you need to support Homes for All. A third of the people in that picture, which was just a year ago, are no longer working with us. And a big reason why we've got so much staff turnover is these limited service positions. I think we've got a good enough reputation. We don't have any problem hiring competent people and really qualified people, but they don't see much of a future with us when their job is going to end in 12 to 18 months. So it's hard to keep them, and we lose a lot of people because of that. So this, thanks to Alex and Nate, you know, are making the case to the governor that we really do need stable positions in our department to deliver. From my perspective, you know, I like new people, I like change, but having a new person every 6 months is hard. And to train them to be effective and build those relationships that I need for them to be effective takes 6 to 18 months, and they're gone by the time we've got them trained. So I need to get off this.
Remind the committee about the Homes for All program.
Yeah.
And, okay, and what it is exactly you're asking for and where it is in the budget.
Where it is, Homes for All was an initiative, and I'm going to just jump through my slides here.
Are you, oh, there you go.
Yeah. Um, Alex, where is it in the budget?
Homes for all?
Yeah, it's in the,
But is it in the administration's housing plan?
Well, there is not a budget ask for Homes for All. Because
There's a position
There's
ask
a
for it.
position ask for it,
Yeah.
yeah.
In the housing plan?
Well, yeah, in the housing bill and in the governor's budget, so there's $300,000 for
Oh.
the extension of 2 limited service positions. And this-
And is that different from the housing development tech assistant?
Yes.
Yes.
So there's 2 positions.
Yeah.
That will be on my team, that this, with your support, we can stabilize these positions.
Right. They're limited service now.
Yes.
Okay.
But Homes for All was an initiative started, I think, by Michael Sorokian a couple of years ago. He had a strong interest in ADUs. How do we get more ADUs to create more housing options? Because you don't have to really build a new building. The permitting's easier. We broadened it out a little bit to say, it's ADUs are part of the solution, but we need bigger and more units in a lot of different options to meet the market's needs. So we broadened the scope and created this initiative called Homes for All. It too was started by an amazing, talented person who was a limited service who got very excited about housing and left us to go on to take a real estate program at Harvard. So we want to be able to pick up where we left off, but without the staff, we couldn't have the program going. But quickly, Homes for All, it aims to build a stronger housing ecosystem that's aimed at helping our rural communities create housing. We have a lot of, there's an economy of scale when you have a 30-unit development, a large multifamily development, but that's not going to be welcomed in a smaller community, in a smaller format. And the other problem we're trying to tackle is developers are not going to come to a rural community and build the houses they need at the scale that they think is appropriate. So we need to reinvent how we do this process. So we need to train people to actually build the homes, and they need to be locally grown. They're the ones with the land. They're the ones who can kind of navigate the local permitting process and get the projects going. But they often need help and a lot of technical services around them to ensure that they are successful. So one component of Homes for All is to do this training cohort to identify a group of people all across the state, provide them very targeted and meaningful assistance and wraparound services. So if I'm a carpenter and I've never built a home, and rented a home, what are the services I need to be successful? So getting that cohort set up is a project we're working on right now. The RFP is out. We hope to have responses soon. Third phase of the project is actually doing a design, pre-permitted designs to ensure that I think part of the challenge that we face in Vermont is people say they want housing, they just don't want it next to them, or they don't want it to be too big, or they don't want to be able to see it if it is next to them. So Homes for All was an initiative that we engaged with 5 communities. Representative Howard was one of these communities, where we said, okay, we need housing. What is the type of home that would fit in your community? What is the type of building that you would accept? And these are smaller multi-unit homes, 4 units or less, based on our traditional Vermont vernacular designs, but new and can meet our new modern contemporary needs. And we asked these communities, is this the kind of home that you would welcome in your community? And the overwhelming response was yes. So figuring out how to engage communities, flipping it up rather to say not in my backyard to yes in my backyard, so long as it's this type of building, and working with through that training cohort, getting local builders engaged in the process to become local developers. There is, through this process, and I'm not going through my slides, I'm just talking, I apologize. We found the kind of this sweet spot where under 4 units is a threshold where the Department of Fire Safety, and these buildings will be safe and approved to meet state standards, but buildings are substantially less expensive because you don't need 2 means of ingress. You don't need an elevator. You don't need a lot of things like sprinkler systems that do drive a lot of costs. These buildings will be completely safe, but because they're not so large, they're under this threshold. So the vision for Homes for All is to, again, work with a lot of communities, 5 or 6 communities, go through an engagement process where they say, this is the type of home we'd like to see in our community. And where the first phase created a workbook that you saw and kind of some demo simulations of kind of this is the kind of buildings that communities would like. We need to take it to the next level to construction-ready drawings that are pre-permitted. The communities that would volunteer for this, you know, we'd like this services, we'd like you to come to our community. The expectation from them would be that if we do this, you're going to have an administrative approval process for these homes because you've agreed that these are the types of homes that you would like to see in your community. And we are going to work with the Division of Fire Safety to make sure that this kit of 30 or 40 home designs can be ready to go, turnkey. We're working with VHFA and our other partners. VHIP could also be another means to subsidize these homes. So a new developer, you know, building at a smaller scale can be more expensive. So there is going to need to be some subsidy to make sure that these projects pencil out. But we did a lot of kind of statewide engagement on it. There's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm on it. We just had to stop it because we didn't have that person to make this happen. I can show you some quick slides here, what we did. You know, what we call missing middle is not tied to AMI. It is actually a housing type. It is a multi-unit housing type at a smaller scale, but it's commonplace in all of our communities. But because of zoning changes that started in the 50s and 60s that kind of split up our uses, basically made them impossible to build. In many of our communities, sorry, I'm zipping through here. We have opportunities for infill. You know, we worked really hard on the Home Act and Act 181 to align the regulations to create these housing opportunities. There's so many infill lots. I think the common complaint you hear about Act 181 is the areas that are exempt from Act 250 aren't big enough. But if you actually look into a community, there are so many side lots and vacant lots that are unused. They're close to sewer and water services. So these are the types of places that you need to build. But because of our zoning and our regulations, they were just locked up. You couldn't build on them. So this is a sample of a snip from a project in South Bend, Indiana, where they did some analysis in the community. This is an analysis in Vermont, where we looked at Swan. There's so many infill opportunities in our town. We also looked at Waterbury, Barry. There are lots of places where we could tuck in a lot more houses. But the trick is getting communities to say, this is the type of home that we would like to see in our community. This is a sample of kind of what we were trying to do or are aiming to do. This is in South Bend, Indiana. They created, through a public engagement process, a catalog of pre-developed construction-ready drawings that they would hand over to developers and they would build. And it's done amazing things. It's been replicated in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and one other jurisdiction. And we'd like to be able to do that here. But we need your help and we need a staff person to stand it up.
Chris, I don't see in the governor's proposal, I don't see this.
So that's right. Homes for All has already stood up as an initiative. We're not seeking additional.
No, you're seeking
Just the position.
the position. So is it in the governor's budget?
Yeah, and that's right, the position. Yes.
Ask Cameron to give us language of that, just
Okay,
to move
great.
it over and then we can discuss
okay,
it.
great.
Yeah, we don't need any
All right,
statutory authority.
You're just showing us how great it is and you need more staff to make
right,
it.
and why?
robust.
And asking for our support in our, presumably for our support in the budget letter.
Absolutely.
Got it.
But could you talk for just a minute, because we really do have a hard stop. Can you just talk for a minute about, do you have anything to say about the Home Ownership Education Center that people are talking about? I take it not. Okay. The Downtown and Village Tax Credit Program has been successful, I take it. You think that the 3 to 5 expansion from 3 million to 5 million is a positive thing?
Absolutely, yeah. Demand far exceeds 5 million right now. And because of the changes made by Act 181, more villages are going to be eligible automatically for the benefits. So we're going to feel some more pressures on the program. So we need to be able to fund the projects. It hurts us every time to walk away from good projects because we don't have the money.
So 5 million isn't enough.
5 million is a good start, and that's what's in the governor's budget.
That's
so.
your base.
Yeah, that's what. you're
It's always a
asking
good start.
for. Sorry, okay. Any questions for Chris? Really interesting initiative.
Sorry, I didn't get to show you all the pretty pictures, but we were short on time. But you do have the slides.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing.
If you,
And the
Have
book
more
is gonna
questions.
be ready this spring, right?
well, the book is already out, and you got a copy of that.
Not that book.
Yeah.
Looks like this.
Oh, so no, so the process is, we need support in the budget
Okay,
to hire the position. We won't have the money for that position until July.
right.
So this is likely a fall conversation, identifying the communities, going through the process, working with them, and then I would hope finishing the catalog of books, that summer. The following.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
other questions? Chris, thank you.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated. Really
Absolutely.
interesting.
Thank you for your support.
All right, members of the committee, hold on here. We're reconvening at 1 p.m. for a walkthrough markup of the bill, but also for a general discussion. One of the things we're gonna have,
Can you
What-
please reload? your page?
yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I just realized.
How do you know what he's doing?
That
You know,
was,
she-
that was
She
impressive.
knows everything that I'm doing. At 1 p.m. to 2:15 for an hour and 15 minutes. We're having just committee discussion. And one of the things we want to do here is just for people to talk about ideas they have. For things that might either, if you have a comment on things generally that are in here, but mostly new ideas. Because where we're moving towards is by next Tuesday. By the end of the day, I think we really want to have this thing be pretty close to where it needs to get as an idea, a whole idea, so that we can walk through it piece by piece. Have a committee discussion. We can ask, where are people? We don't have to vote for every piece, but we can, if it looks like there's a problem, we can take a straw vote, but we can just get a sense of the committee. Where are we on this? And we walk through each piece so that by Friday, we can, our last day before town meeting, by Friday, we can take a straw poll at least. Then come back after town meeting, and on the Tuesday after town meeting, we vote. So that's our intention.
And I really appreciate you giving us this time, and I feel like it's a good process as a committee bill that everyone, if there are things that you feel like you want to see, and then obviously with Ledge Council, it takes time to get things added, but thank you for giving us that time to, so if you think of anything over lunch that you want to come to, now's the time.
Right, and it's aspirational too. That is, there's things I would like, maybe I won't get them,
Right.
but that's not where we start. We start with what should be in here.
And what's important to your district or your constituents or anything else that you'd like to advocate for.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.